Hello and welcome to a screencast on task 4.2. So as I said in task 4.1, this is the last mandatory requirement of this unit before moving on to unit 5 and unit 6. But for task 4.2 now asks you to start to look at your session plans, and in particular for those that we'll be focusing on within our school at Finchley Catholic, of the current year sevens. So when you are planning your sessions for the year sevens. So as you can see with this particular session plan, it's over 2 or 3 pages, so I'll sort of go through it with you so that you have a full understanding. So the first section at the top here looks at the date of the session, so you just need to add that in, and the time and duration. So most of your sessions will be between 30 to 1 hour as a normal kind of lesson, and obviously what time that takes place will depend on the allocation of the year 7 class. And then the participants, so I would imagine during our sports leader sessions you'll have no more than 20 students, and obviously you'll be able to say what age they are. So year 7 they'll be under 12 years old, and then ability you should hopefully be able to put that in there in terms of low, medium, or if it's mixed. After the first session plan, in session 2 and session 3 you should be able to obviously fill out your previous session. So I think it's important to make a note at this point. In terms of task 4.1, it says here in the paragraph that those 3 sessions must be linked. So in regards to the sport that you choose. So for example, if you're looking at the sport of football, then the requirement and the expectation would be that you would do 3 linked sports of football and the session of football. So it might be of passing, it then might be of shooting, and it then might be of tackling or marking, for example, but it should be linked to that specific sport. When you get to session 2 and 3, you also need to make sure that you show some progression. So how have the particular students that you are teaching, whether it be in the first session and then it might be a few weeks later before you teach them again, how are you trying to progress? How are you trying to make it more challenging, maybe perhaps more difficult, to build upon the foundations and the fundamentals that they already have? So we've gone through this section here, the top bit, what you're focusing on, what your objective is. So as I said, it could be passing, and more specifically you might be looking at short passing or long range passing, and then what are you going to do in the following session. You then also need to fill out the facilities, the workspace that you're going to be using, the environment, so what facilities you have available to you, what equipment you might need. That will come in the equipment list here, and you can just jot them down, just bullet point them down. So just for your own mind, you are clear. And I'll need to see this session plan before you actually deliver your lesson. So it's important to get into good routines already, so you know exactly what you need. So then we come to the nuts and bolts of the actual session plan itself. So similar to when you were doing your events planning, that it's broken down into introduction and warm-up, the main session itself, and then obviously moving on towards the cool down and plenary. So in the introduction, how are you going to introduce yourself? What are your expectations? How are you going to deliver certain questions? What might you ask? All these things here that you can prompt into your introduction, and obviously what are you going to do in terms of a warm-up. So is there a specific game related or sports related session warm-up you're going to do? Is it going to be competitive, or is it going to be you following or the students following you as the leader, or are you going to have designated students leading the warm-up? So that then links into this idea of progression, regression, and adaptation. So the progression, making it, how can you make the warm-up more challenging? Can you adapt it at all? Can you get some of the gifted and talented higher ability students to be leading on more things? Do you need to regress it? Is it too difficult? So do you need to take a step back and make it and simplify it? So what changes would you make? So they will be going into that section there. The main session itself, so Here you need to be showing the timings of your session. What are you going to do? If you're looking at passing, what specifically are you going to look in passing? The techniques, what are the key teaching points that you're going to include, and what does the actual session look like? If you have an hour lesson, you'd want to be doing more than one activity. You want to be progressing it. You want to be making it perhaps more challenging and more difficult. So 2 or 3 activities really kind of need to be involved in here. And you can show that often in terms of diagrams. It could just be a simplified diagram whereby you've got a key and you can actually show, like in a bird's eye view map of what's going on. Again, you'll need to show progression here. So how are you making it more challenging? How are you making it more difficult for your students? Is there a challenging element? Are you adapting and changing the equipment, for example? So is the size of the balls changing? Is the size of the pitch changing? All of those things you need to consider as you make your session and as you deliver your session. And then finally, the cool down and close. So what are you doing to get the students back in together? What type of questions are you asking them to see if they've reinforced the learning of the lesson? What were the key teaching points? And then obviously a cool down. So what specific stretching are they doing? How long are they holding those stretches for? And so on. And then finally, other things to remember or to be aware of. So is there any other health and safety that you need to be aware of? Is there anything else in terms of maybe behaviour or a specific student perhaps not being paired up with someone else? Or is there a teaching assistant in the lesson? All of those things will need to be taken into consideration, and that will be kind of what you are thinking about after you've observed the Year 7s the first and second time in your activity itself. Once you've done your session, once you've actually delivered your session, you then need to again reflect upon your session. So we're looking at the evaluation method used. So again, we're either looking here at the wagon wheel aspect, so performance profiling, so rating it out of 10, or using a scale system between 0 and 10. Those would be the 2 main evaluation methods used. Okay, so either the wagon wheel itself or looking at a scale of 0 to 10. What were some of your strengths? What things went well in your particular session? What were you happy with in particular in your session? And what areas needed to improve and what areas need to develop? So was it the communication aspect? Was it the delivery? Was it something whereby in terms of where you were standing perhaps? Okay, all of those things that you need to think about. What didn't go so well perhaps in your session? How can you make improvements to your session? Once you've identified what needs to improve, what are you going to do in your third or your second session to actually implement and reflect upon and actually action upon the reflections that you've made? So that's an important point to think about, and that really is going to define you as a sports leader if you're acting upon some of the reflections that you've actually committed, and you think about, right, what can I do next time to get better? And how will these improvements be measured? So again, that could be just through simply the teacher, the assessor observing you. It might be thinking about getting some student feedback. So were the students happier regards to what you did? You can actually ask them. So you can get feedback through the verbal aspect and also just by speaking to the tutor, so by myself. That should be session 1, 2 and 3. So like I said, these need to be linked, these need to be comprehensive, these need to be detailed. These are one of the most important elements and most important parts of the Sports Leader booklet, that you have this filled in correctly and well to show the examiner, to show the moderator that actually not only can you plan a session as a sports leader, but you're acting upon what things perhaps didn't go so well, and next time you're going to improve upon it. So I wish you the best of luck there. If you need any help, then feel free to ask me, but it's about thinking about the adaptations, the regressions, and the progressions, and I wish you the best of luck.